feel.
And in your, I mean, I say this with like the utmost respect. I mean, with the utmost sincerity. It's just like, I love, like, you know, let's go, what does this word mean? Let's go a bit deeper and let's really explore it. So that's what I got. And so to me, as some other people may have already mentioned this, the video that you showed, the 6-minute video, that was really powerful. I really love that one. So I think that kind of gave me a lot to think about on many levels. So I'll leave it there for now. Like, you can talk more about it, but I'd like to get Karen and Mike a chance.
Well, somebody's going to have to mute because we're going to get that echo. And
I can
there,
mute.
yeah, I think that'll help. You guys might all have to mute. I'm not sure why the sound is different here, but Karen, I'll mute you. And Mike, as you did already. Okay, that way we don't get the recording all goofy, but by all means, I'll have you come in. So pay attention to where your mute button is. You know, that video, I discovered it just a few days before I delivered it to you guys last week. And I thought, man, I'm breaking a copyright rule. I know I am. I've got to reach out to these people. And I did. I reached out to the people that produced the video and found out that Chief Orrin Lyons actually gave that talk in 2007, which, how's that for, you know, here we are 14 years later, and it felt as true or truer today than when he first laid it out. And I reached out to this organization that had made the video with that talk and explained who I was and what I was doing and would it be okay, and he gave me full permission. Do you know how rare that is for people that think about proprietary ownership of ideas and content? And, you know, part of the vision that I've been shown over and over again is there is no such thing as intellectual property when you move into a higher state of consciousness, because you recognize that you are all sharing from the same well of wisdom. And this guy came back and he says, no, use it, but just give us attribution and, you know, give, you know, Brother Lyons attribution. And I did. And that was the first time in all my years of presenting to different audiences and using other people's materials that somebody came back so quickly, like within 12 hours, and said, yes, of course. Like, he understood we were coming from the same place, that we've got to get this message out, and I'm just another channel of the message, right? So it just restores my faith in humans, that we're waking up and we're doing the right thing. And so that video impacts me heavily. I've watched it probably 20 times over the last week and a half. And what I kept hearing in that messaging was the waiting part, that people are just waiting for somebody to sit up and take the lead. And you know, I say, I actually made buttons last year when I first launched the app that said, I'll go first. And another set of buttons that said, a fool for love, right? Like, I got nothing. If I'm going to look like a fool, I'd rather look like a fool for love than a fool for fear, you know? So this is where I'm coming from. So let's go ahead and get started, and whoever comes. And as you can imagine, I've got some more slides to share. This is what I do. Niraj, you like that? I'm going to have you guys come back in and just, oh, maybe I can't, because then the echo will still be there. All right. I miss having it live. We got to figure out how to get the echo out of this. All right. So are you seeing, oh, there's Deanna Hobbs. And let's see. You are screen sharing. Are you guys seeing my PowerPoint slides? Thumbs up? Yeah, good. Okay, great. Great. Here we go. And there we have it. So when I first laid out this idea, you know, actually it came about last year, and I thought I really just need to get a regular conversation going. And I went into a studio and produced 9 hours of content, and it's up on YouTube. And I'm very content with everything I've put out there. I have no clawbacks, nothing that I felt was inappropriate or off mark. But what was off the mark is the lack of conversation. It didn't feel like I was really in a relational mode with other people. And this is called the healing, not monologue, but the healing conversation, right? So I sat and sat for months, and it felt like this was the next right thing. It's just whoever shows up, just keep putting it out there like a broadcaster. Like the channel, when it first opened to me, I was getting downloads that were lasting 2 and 3 hours a night for 4 and 5 nights a week. My sleep patterns were completely disrupted, and then it softened for a little while I did some of my own personal growth work, and it seemed to always be sort of this 2 steps forward for me, and then another step forward for the medicine, and 2 more steps forward, and then another, or a claw back on me, like just about the time I think I'm like solid and stable and all this, that I would go through this dark night of the soul stuff again. And you know, there's just layers and layers of trust that comes with stepping into your own medicine, whatever that happens to be. So I'm being as transparent as I know how to be, because I want you to recognize in your own path these landmarks that show up as you move from that, you know, that wounded state of being to this higher state of being. There's another beautiful human. So when I was laying out what I was going to talk about, I knew what the first session was. It was kind of going to be a broad brush of what the healing conversation is and why the timing is so important right now. But then even that night, I felt that sting of what had happened in Texas. And you remember I posted that little bit of a snippet, and I could feel then that this was this was a seed of something really big. Like, you know, this is what I feel like I was feeling for this time, that there was going to be some major event that was going to help hasten the process. Because we get real complacent. Look how comfortable we've gotten with how much disruption there is in our lives right now. Like we go back to sleep way too fast. So this one felt like the right next conversation to have. So I'm going to talk about abortion, free will, and boundaries. And some of these things you will have heard me say before in a previous session. Some you'll hear me grab a thread and bring it into another session. I want you to picture what happens in my brain when I get all these downloads. They're like these nodes of information and packets that come, and they don't necessarily fit together until I begin to unpack them. And it's in the unpacking and the speaking them out loud and the writing them and the building of slides and the conversation that all the pieces start to come together. Because I think about the pieces of your story, the pieces of my story. If you try and give an account of your life in a linear fashion, wow, did it get really dark all of a sudden? It did, didn't it? Lights on me. I'm surprised. Hang on. Let's see if I can rearrange things just a hair. There, put a little light on my face, maybe. I don't know. Whew, that's dark. Dark. Okay, there we go. Now you can see me a little bit. So I get these nodes, and it starts to build kind of a neural net in my brain. And for the first 3 years, I would just capture the download. I didn't try and process it into anything other than just capturing it. But then I began to see this theme where it would take me through almost the same nodes, but from a different beginning and end. Like I could drop into this internal conversation from whatever was happening in the world around me in a very relational field and go, oh, that's question number 3. You know, am I willing to fact check my fears? And so I would begin to start to see this whole thing come together into this constellation of ideas. Well, I want to share with you when this piece that I'm going to talk about tonight first started to tap on the window pane of my brain. And it was the night of the election. And I had been now 2 years, in 2.5 years, channel open, hearing, listening, capturing, questioning. Like somebody said, who are you when you channel? And I was like, I don't know. Nobody said, hey, I'm Magdalena, or I'm this, or I'm that. No, that doesn't feel right. None of that feels right. That all feels very forced. And I kept hanging in there. And after a while, it became clear that what I was tapping into was my own consciousness, my own higher state of consciousness. Now, I'm not here to tell you that somebody else doesn't have some access to Pleiadians or Arcturians or, whatever organizing model they want to put their information through. But for me, it just feels like what I'm tapping into is my own information. So hang on. Deanne, do you have a question? Deanne, are you?
Nope, no question.
All right, good. You're good then. All right, so thank you. So the day of the election, I was, you got to know, my last name is Osborne. For years since we bought this land, it's called the Land of Oz. People call me Glinda, the Good Witch. I mean, I've got some stuff going on with the Land of Oz thing. So here I am in Kansas on the night of the election. It's the only time I've ever been to Kansas in my life, but it's a 3-day training to accountants, teaching them consciousness. And it's going to be a great day because Hillary Clinton's going to win the election. And I got this certainty about all of that. And I'm all revved up but then I'm going through the conversation. Now you have to tone it down, Edie, because everybody in that room for the next 3 days did not vote like you did. So you're going to have to be humble and remember that not everybody is going to want to see the world the way you see it. I mean, I've got myself all humbled up, right? And then the airport loses my luggage, my hard drive dies on my computer, and by 10:30 in Kansas time, Pennsylvania has fallen, and I'm in the deepest, darkest despair of my life. I'm just like, no, this can't have been happening. How can this be? And I just kept asking. I had a little cannabis on board, and I kept asking, why this? And I was shown a boomerang, and that this boomerang had this movement through our human story, that whatever you believe about, is it God, is it us, is it unified field of consciousness, wherever we source from, whatever organizing thoughts you have around that very ineffable thing, this boomerang is thrown out into the universe. And it spins and it spins and it spins, and it goes through a certain sort of physics to get from there back to home again. And because of the shape of the boomerang, it deploys 2 very specific physical attributes. One is called angular momentum, and the other is gyrational torque. And that we would reach a point where that boomerang goes as far out into the distance as it can before it begins to return home. Like there's a moment where it makes the flip. The angular momentum keeps it now not going out into space, but back home to itself. So you're getting the visual metaphor in your mind, right? That the human story is winding and winding, kind of like a Kundalini spring. Each time we get a little bit smarter, a little bit more aware, a little bit wiser. And we reach that moment, that inflection point, where we begin to tip towards love over fear, where we begin to remember more than we've forgotten about who we are. And so this boomerang mental model for me, what became clear is if you're standing on the fringes of certainty out here, like I am certain that there's only one right way to get to God. I am certain that that people are lazy and not worthy of being taken care of, or that, you know, that there is no God. You know, any place where you're hanging on to certainty, you're going to be on the outer edge of that boomerang. And now imagine that boomerang is speeding up in order to reach that peak of momentum to create the angular shift that has to happen in that boomerang. It's going to go faster and faster and faster. And we're going to have these moments, this gyrational torque, where our entire psyche is going to come unglued from its old position. And I've had moments like that in my life where all of a sudden my perceptual shift is so significantly different. Sometimes it's been in a medicine space. Sometimes it's just been in watching the world around me and recognizing how much of the drama in my life was self-imposed. Like the minute I got the drama trauma loop story mapped out, I was like, oh, I don't have to react in drama every time something comes up, right? I can hold a different space. So the angular momentum piece is what we're going to be, you know, just we're feeling that acceleration, that momentum. Like just in the last 3 years, there has been so much disruption around who to trust, what to trust, who's right, who's wrong, and where do we source truth from? Where do our lies come from? And it comes from fear and the bias. Like all of that is so clear right now for all of us to pay attention to. But it started for me the night of the election. And when I saw that boomerang, I was like, okay, I get it. Life is happening for us, not to us. We have to go through this level of shift, this level of torque, this level of disruption of our curse of certainty, our attachment to the old story, in order to free the way for this thing to turn. At the same time, I was reminded of the story of an oil tanker, and that it takes them like up to a mile to turn. And it's not because they have one large rudder, but they have a lot of little rudders, dozens and dozens and dozens of little rudders. And that this movement was the same, that it would take each of us fully engaged in our highest expression to be a rudder of shift. So, you know, it's not, there's no Messiah, there's no one person, there's no Dalai Lama who's going to, it's each of us creating the shift in our lives, right? So I get it all. I'm like, okay, it's not time for the feminine. She didn't really represent the feminine. She represented a woman colluding with the patriarchy to get to that point. You know, like I'm unpacking all the ways that I had gone blind about why she couldn't win. It's not her fault. It just is what it is. She wasn't the right person. And now I trust everything happens for a reason. So I said, okay, how do I deal with these beautiful humans that I've come to teach consciousness to? And I have to show up conscious with them. How do I do that? Because I'm really upset. And I was snotty crying and my eyes were all red. And I showed up to do the training. And this one guy came up to me and he said, you okay? And he knew, right? It was pretty obvious. And I said, I'm worried. This is this is not something that I think is going to turn out well for us. I just don't. And he said, well, and I said, no, I don't want to know who you voted for. I want to know what you voted for. What did you vote for? And he said, I voted for the Farm Belt. I'm worried. You know, our farms are failing and our kids are leaving, and our economies are, you know, subject to a commoditized structure, and you know, the government controls us basically, and only large corporations survive and small ones don't. And yeah, I get it. And I said, and farming practices are killing the earth. Monocropping is going to be the death of us. And he acknowledged that, you know, we were going to have to change a lot of things in order for us to be able to really move forward. And I said, I can meet you there. Doesn't matter who you voted for. What you voted for is something I can meet you at. And it shifted my whole lens of perception. This was one of those moments where I had a jolt. And I stopped seeing people who I didn't agree with politically as the enemy. I saw us being manipulated to be enemies, but that really at the end of the day, if you sat down and really spoke, or from the heart with different people, 99% of this stuff we could probably work out, but we have been so polarized. And so, that brings us to this moment around abortion. Right now, for a country that was founded on the idea of freedom of religion, and also with that comes freedom from religion, we have now reached a tipping point towards a theocratic model of governance. And this is dangerous. This is putting somebody else's curse of certainty, absolutism about what this human story is about, or what I call my big toe, TOE, theory of everything. Religion is a big toe. It's a theory of what happens before we got here and what happens when we die, that there's a Messiah, that, they scholars have unpacked the whole religious model and discovered its roots are in fear and superstition. And so, churches have, called those people heretics. They put them to death. They burned them at the stake. Anybody who raised an objection to that certainty, who said, hey, I got a different view of things over here. We take care of nature. Nature takes care of us. We sort of worship Pachamama, right? Like if you had a different model of thought, a different big toe, you were killed for it. You were persecuted for it. And I was thinking of the book, The Scarlet Letter. Do you remember that book, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and how the woman had an affair with the priest and he had to pronounce her the adulterer, and ended up with, wearing the big scarlet A, and strong feminine said, pardon my French, fuck you, I can wear this A. This is all about you. This isn't about me, right? And so she claimed, but that scarlet A has been on women since the beginning. Even the story of Adam and Eve has created this mindset that the women were the ones that, brought us into sin. So we've got this whole rep out there about being sinners and being, putting men in a position where they can't control themselves. Don't you just love how Greg Abbott is going to cure rape in Texas this week? He's decided that that's the way to avoid abortion conversation, is say it's just we're not going to have any more rape. If you could have done it before, wouldn't you have? What would have stopped you? I mean, come on, let's have a rational conversation. But there is no rationality in that level of certainty. There is a means to an end, a piece of the puzzle here, a religious undertone. These guys have been stacking the courts. They've been chipping away at this because they don't like the idea that women can have power in this world. And our first and greatest power over them is our sexuality. So the whole patriarchal misogynist wing of the ship is all about keeping the feminine in check, because let's face it, companies that are run by women are more successful. Do you know, in the last 2 years, we've had more women by far graduating from college than men. Like, women are having their day. And COVID, to some degree, many women had to stay home because their jobs were the expendable ones, where the men kept working during COVID and the women stayed home. And so there's just been this, there's just this cauldron of stuff around the role that we play. Mexico, I don't know if you know this, 2 nights ago, Mexico, a very Catholic country, very much against abortion based in the church, now has more than 50% of their legislators as women, just passed a countrywide decriminalization of abortion. They legalized abortion in Mexico. At the same time, Greg Abbott is signing documents to keep those sinful women from getting away with that thing that they did, like that legs open thing that they did, right? And he's going to stop the rapists. So we'll never have an excuse. He didn't say anything about the incest, but I'm sure he's got some friends that fit that description too. Like, so here's Mexico. At the same time, and this is what I want you to watch for. I see this. At the same time, the shadow rises up, so does the light. Like there's this beautiful sort of, like, we think of Mexico in our very geocentric white supremacist way as being substandard, subhuman, all the language, and yet here they are doing something that's just leapfrogging our consciousness. So this whole thing about religion driving the legislative bus is the patriarchy's co-opting of religion and its fear-based storyline into their power grab. Because I can tell you, those men who voted to keep other women from having access to safe and legal abortions have taken their wives, their daughters, and their mistresses to an abortion clinic, or paid for it, or in some way know somebody who they wouldn't admit to out loud having had an abortion. So we try and combat that. We come at it from a science perspective. We come at it from a judicial. Well, what about rape and incest? Like that's their hook is you're murdering babies. And we say, but yeah, wait, what about rape and incest? Can you feel those two polar energies? Like justification on both sides, right? We've got our fists are out. Our fists are out on that one. Like, you men do this to us, and now do you not get the irony in this moment? Do you not see how you're the ones that create the issue, and now you're punishing us for the issue you created, right? Oh, it's the greatest gaslighting mind fuck of all time, the masculine making the feminine wrong for being feminine, for being who we are. And then we go down the medical route. Well, what about the life of the mother? You know, that's surely that has to, at what point does the fetus have to take a second seat to the mother? And their view is it's in God's hands. Well, how can you argue with God, right? Like, I mean, they really have set this up so that there's just no easy way to get into the story with them and have a conversation. And then, of course, the socioeconomic, no safety net. Yes, we're pro-life, but good luck on the other side when you have that baby. And so I was thinking about this, like, all right, let's really have a conversation about this. Who's having abortions? And so I did some research, and this was interesting. Roughly 60% of, and maybe this number is on another slide. Yeah, the next slide, which I'll show you in a second. That's roughly 60% of women who have abortions already have a child. That was a big aha for me. Like, wow, we used to think of unwed mothers as being teenagers, when in fact teenagers are very small, about 17% of those who are getting pregnant. The rest are between 20 and 30 years old, roughly, who are in college, trying to build a career, trying to establish themselves financially. And the idea that they, being the bulk of users of this service, and to make them basically disable their effectiveness in the world by having to have a baby. Boy, that just, whoo, that accomplishes so much so quickly. You stop these women who are coming into power, who are taking over legislative bodies and voting in abortion and making men accountable, the Me Too movement, holding men, and the economics. Women tend to think of things more in terms of greater good, not individual wealth consumption and accumulation. So there's just a whole host of ways that women represent just this huge threat to the patriarchy. So what we're seeing now is this last gasp of power grab. from the patriarchy, because they can feel their days are numbered. The old white guys, and no harm, no foul there, Mike, you know, I'm not talking about you. It's a terrible thing to put it on all men, but there is men of a certain age and a certain ideological supremacy of thought that they're entitled to something greater than the rest of us. So about 1 in 4 women have had an abortion by age 45. That's, you know, we knew that, 25% of us. More than half the abortion patients were in their 20s, 24 to 29. Adolescents made up only 12% of abortion patients. And you know, those younger than 15 were less than 0.2%. White patients accounted for 39%. Black patients, 28, Hispanics, 25. You know, it's the wives and mistresses and daughters of these old white guys that are having these abortions, and they can afford to go off and do it. But it's the poor women that cannot afford the time off and all of the other barriers to entry that have been put in their way. Interesting. 17% identified as mainline Protestant, 13 evangelical Protestant, 24% as Catholic, 38 reported no, sort of that SBNR, I think, spiritual but not religious, and 8% some others. So there's a lot of Christians who've had abortions. Let's be clear about this. This is not something that they're talking about. In fact, the vast majority have some affiliation to God, some reference to an external deity that they're willing to identify themselves under that title. So you can start to feel the contradictions here. Their own women are not holding the line of chaste behaviors. Like their own family systems are unraveling around them. So you can feel how the millennials and the Zers are like, yeah, we're non-binary, and we're, you know, sex is just an expression. And you can just feel the old patriarchal father knows best, you will do as I say, coming completely unglued, right? So their unconsciousness is now fully projected into controlling the feminine. Vast majority say they're heterosexual and so on. Some 75% of abortion patients were poor, having income below the federal poverty level. Less than $15,000 a year, adjusted to today, maybe that's $17,000 a year. How do you live on $17,000 a year if you already have children? You don't. This perpetuates women in poverty. Like, this really keeps a subclass of the feminine forever in that dependent state and subject to governmental, you know, gives and takes. I mean, it's just, we talk about empowering people, and we're disempowering with this one movement about abortion. So here's the other one. 51% of abortion patients were using contraceptive method in the month they became pregnant. Some condoms, some other hormonal products. So it's not like we're running around trying to get pregnant. It's not, you know, I'm like, we're doing life and we get pregnant. It happens. And this is the one that really hit me, is I know that sense of what would it cost to have another child? My daughter is in that debate right now. You know, she's coming up on an age where decisions have to be made. And she's like, this is expensive. I have a child with special needs. I don't know that we can do this, right? Like, the economic factor is real, because she's, I want to be able to give to the child I have. So I went a little deeper, and I wanted to understand, you know, who's getting. And so this is an interesting infographic that sort of summarizes all the things that we just talked about. But this one, I think, is really important, that our abortion rate is at a historic low. Think about that. If you really care about lowering the abortion rate, you would be celebrating this number. You would be singing it from the mountaintops and saying, look, it's already happening. But no, instead, there's this movement to have these draconian abortion to basically undermine our Constitution, Supreme Court held decision, it's not about stopping abortions. It isn't at all. And in fact, our birth rate is going down by cohort. The younger the women are, the less likely they are to have multiple children. You know, women in the 2000 cohort are going to have roughly, you know, births per, so 40,000 births per. So it's the numbers are going down here. And so the numbers, our birth rate is falling. We have an overcrowding poverty situation. And yet we're telling women that they can't control their own bodies. Like this doesn't make sense to me. This is the cohort one, that we're having roughly 2 children or half a child versus the 2.2 of my mother's cohort. So the numbers are really shifting, and it's a lot. 2/3 of abortions occurred in the 8 weeks of pregnancy or earlier. 88% in the first 12 weeks. They're proposing a 6-week ban. Most women don't realize they're pregnant until well past that 6-week mark. So this is a guaranteed no abortion is going to happen in the states that try and push this through. But this is just the latest assault. This has been going on for a long time. And this doctor, I just love that there's no such thing as consensual rape. Ectopic pregnancies cannot be reimplanted. Rape zygotes are not expelled by the female body. All of these are, of course, quotes from our political leaders who've done so much research on the feminine female anatomy. Heart cells beat in petri dishes and are not a sign of intelligent life. There's an electric pulse that can be detected from the moment a cell begins to, that zygote begins to divide. The division happens because there's an electrical pulse. The vital force of our energy on this planet begins to bring that raw material into some form or fashion. And so if they're saying it's a heartbeat law, then what they're really saying is it's an electrical impulse law. It's not really a heart. It's just, but they don't want to hear this, right? And oh, women are not your property. In fact, what abortion is, from my lens of perception, is it's a proxy war between the rise of the feminine and the fall of the patriarchy. Abortion is the ultimate overstep into the feminine boundaries. Like, we have to navigate what it means to have a baby in our bodies. That is a major boundary conversation, to bring another spirit into our bodies. And there needs to be, for it to happen with joy and love and acceptance, a context, a container that honors the feminine, that she can be met in that vulnerability of carrying life in a way that doesn't leave her in survival mode. And so it makes absolute sense that women who want to elevate their safety and security in the world, in a world that does not tend women and children, she's going to have to make a really hard life and death choice for herself, for that child, and for the children she already has, right? So I'm barely making ends meet. I can't even buy shoes or get the kids to the dentist. Having another baby is just not viable. And if you look at the economic disparity, that, you know, the wealth gap that continues to grow and grow and grow between those at the bottom and those at the top, the squeeze in that gap is what's happening to young families. They can't buy a home because they've got student debt. They can't have children because the cost of childcare, or if they do, they're strapped. And you can just see that it keeps us on this forever economic treadmill, trying to keep up with life. And children are a major, not a burden, but it's a story that we have to carry. We don't carry just our story, we carry their story too, until they can begin to own their own story. And so it's a huge movement for the feminine to make a choice in a world that isn't safe for her to have a child. And so sometimes it doesn't make sense. And that should be enough. Like, we should be able to say, no, this is my body and I'm not ready to loan it out for the next 20 years. Because let's be clear, that's I'm still, I got 4 kids and I'm still, part of my body is loaned out because they got my heart forever. There's a knowing that I'm part of their story and they're part of my story. We're in it together. And so there's no sort of have the child and no big deal. No, this is a big deal. And women have to weigh this very tenderly. And I share this with you because I have weighed this very tenderly twice in my life. Once when I was trying to figure out why sex was a good way to get my father's attention. And I had a relationship with a much older man. And I can look at it now in lots of therapy, unpack that choice was based in deep wounding and looking for acceptance. He wanted nothing to do with a baby. I wanted nothing to do. So yeah, okay. My mom took me, and I never looked at it as a choice that would have been, that I could have ever made good for that child. Like, I just could not see where it would be the right thing for either of us. And then the second time was when I first met my husband, second husband. And I was young enough to pull one more out of the chute. And he had always wanted to. But I also had just been served papers by my ex-husband that he was going to take all the kids away and chase me for alimony. And I thought, oh my God, if I do this, if I have another child right now, I was on birth control and I still got pregnant. And I said, I can't do this. It puts my ability to tend the 4 children I already have at risk. And so I made a choice. And it was not an easy choice. But it was the choice that was right for myself and my children that I already had. So I share that with you because my story is not unique. There are a lot of women who've had to make this not a promiscuous recovery choice, but a loving choice. A choice to love ourselves, to love our children, to love life in a way that, some people having children is a complete re-traumatization of their own childhood. And maybe they need to do some work before they're ready to have children. So it's a thing, and it happens. And women, I believe it's part of their path to consciousness to navigate those choices. And sometimes we navigate them from fear, like the embarrassment, the shaming, I think of all the women who came before us who were sent off to nunneries and their babies were taken from them. I mean, we see story after story of how, okay, I played by your rules, I gave birth, and then you took this child away, you shamed me, you punished me. And so there's never been a win for women who have babies out of wedlock. Like, hear the word wedlock. Wedlock, locking us in. And this is what's coming in this Texas law. This state is putting a bounty out for women who don't comply to a religious belief. This idea that murder happens when a pregnancy ends implies a whole level of intent that I don't believe exists. It's a internal navigation from whatever state of consciousness the woman is at. And there are some that will use abortion in a way that I would be uncomfortable with, but in their situation, I am not here to judge, right? And we see this state bounty thing playing out in these two perspectives. You know, this young man, help me remember his name. Was it Blake? Do you know who I'm talking about? Let's never forget his name because he raped a young woman. Karen, do you remember his name?
No, but she wrote a book saying, "Know my name."
Know my
Brock.
name. Brock.
Yeah.
Brock. Thank you. So he now, the judge said, 20 minutes of, of I don't think it's fair to base the fate of the next 10 years of his life on a decision on a girl who doesn't remember anything but how much she drank. It's a steep price to pay for 20 minutes of action out of his 20 plus years of life. I mean, this stuff is happening. On the other hand, here's the narrative: abortion is the only reason people are fighting to keep it legal so they can go out and screw without protection. The numbers don't bear that out, but they don't care. So you got to look at this as a holy war on the feminine. This is the feminine rising and the masculine, the patriarchy, or what I'm renaming the doctrine of dominion, because it's not about guys. Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of women who've colluded into this story too. The whole shaming of the feminine, because that's how they stayed safe. They aligned with a whole mindset of safety with the masculine that actually is an assault on their own psyche. Like there is a Stockholm syndrome for women who are in this anti-choice, anti-free will movement. So we all have seen these memes. This one came through today, let's explain to Mary which parts of her body belong to Republicans. And it's probably not fair to say Republicans, because it isn't all of them. It's not fair to say it's all men in the patriarchy, because it isn't. But there's starting to be this absolute clarity in the polarization. Can you see that? What was muddy before is now starting to come into some clarity about where the agenda is. Like we're reaching that point where the agenda can no longer be masked in gaslit terms. Like, this is so clear to me. And they even try and bring it into, the whole legal courts perspective. And there's the Pete Buttigieg explanation. Like, this young kid did a really good job of saying, you cannot be forced to give up blood, bone marrow, any part of your body, liver, kidney, to another person. Your body has complete autonomy from the legal system. We've held that as canon in our legal ever since we stopped owning slaves. We said your body is your own property. That this was a big statement in our U.S. Constitution, and that we the people have a right to certain inalienable rights, that we are independent of each other, right? So it's baked into our. I swear to you, the founding fathers were smoking cannabis, because the wisdom that is baked into our story is the lens of love. They tried to create a country that had a lens of love, of equality, and expansion of love in this construct setting. We have to figure out how to do this. It's not like we can all go live on a mountaintop. We have to coexist. We have to create a civil society in order to find the room for us to individually expand. It's this me-we balance. It's not one over the other. It's that the me shines within the collective, and the collective grows as it tends to the individual plants in the garden. That's us, right? There is no winner loser here. We both win. We have to find this balance. And part of that balance is body autonomy, free will over my own body. You cannot take that from me. That is a fundamental tenet of our spiritual expansion on this planet, is to embody our own body, our own truth. So it's baked into our DNA to get this right. But instead we end up with the questions that are there to play gotcha, like to get you for choosing an abortion, like you were a murderer. And Pete Buttigieg, God love this man. I just love how he navigates this conversation. So I'll read it to you. Late-term abortions on the topic thereof. Buttigieg: I think the dialogue has gotten so caught up on where you draw the line that we've gotten away from the fundamental question of who gets to draw the line. And I trust women to draw the line when it's their own health. Chris Wallace asked, so just to be clear, you're saying you would be okay with a woman well into their third trimester deciding about to abort her pregnancy? So Chris Wallace, you probably recognize, is a Fox News commentator. And although he plays fair a lot of the time, you can feel this heavy gotcha moment trying to happen here. And Buttigieg says, look, these hypotheticals are usually set up in order to provoke a strong emotional. Oh, it's not hypothetical, says Wallace. There are 6,000 women a year who get abortions in the third trimester. Okay, we got a number now. All right, that's interesting. Buttigieg says, that's right, representing less than 1% of the cases. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of a woman that's in that situation. If it's late in your pregnancy, then almost by definition, you've been expecting to carry it to term. We're talking about women who have perhaps chosen a name, women who purchased a crib, families that then get the most devastating medical news of their lifetime, something about the health or the life of the mother or viability of the pregnancy that forces them to make an impossible, unthinkable choice. And the bottom line is, as horrible as a choice that is, that woman, that family may seek spiritual guidance, they may seek medical guidance, but that decision is not going to be made any better medically or morally because the government is dictating how that decision should be made. Like, he just nailed it. He totally took the air out of the argument, right? They're trying to gotcha 6,000 women a year. And he just said, no. Let's put it in context. See, right now, I shared with you last week where what I visualize what's happening around us. It's like this cervix is being stretched so far, all the polarization, all the nuance in the middle, all the ways that we could meet each other is clearing. Like, we have to go through this absolute clarity about where is love and where is fear, so that the choice becomes one of self-preservation. The nuance goes away. Mike, I can see you processing that. You want me to repeat that one? Hi, Mike. Back again. This is family night. Everybody's here. So this, oh, I'm glad we recorded because the channel just skipped a beat. And this happens. Like, I'm in the depth of some big outlay about the undercurrent, and it makes me work for it. This movement to make women wrong for following the choice of individual expression is the original wound on the feminine. This is the mother wound that we all carry in us. This assault on the feminine is the manifestation of our separation in this physical world, right? So when we went from a unified field of connected light into the physical form, that first breath is when the soul enters the soul contract to have a human life, to have a physical life. Up to that moment, it's a fluid, no pun and every pun intended, it's a fluid situation until that first breath of life happens. And so we've created this ingenious sort of coding that brings us from dark to light, the metaphor of giving birth to ourselves, coming through the dark tunnel, through this crowning moment of realization that there is a clear choice ahead of us for light and dark. There is a clear choice ahead of us for love or fear. Like right now, it's fractalizing. It's, people who decide to get a vaccine and wear a mask, and people who decide other things. Like this fractalizing is all part of the final tearing of the old story. The fabric of the old story is now like that hymen, just to like pop the cherry into the conversation, that hymen is completely pulled apart. Like you're giving birth to a watermelon. My son, my fourth child, I had all my babies at home, and the first three were girls, and this one was different. And 6 months into my pregnancy, my hips started to separate, and the doctor says, "You've got to be off your feet." And so I had 3 months in bed with this sweet little human. And we would talk every day and listen to music, and I would read him stories, and he just kept getting bigger and bigger. And he got to the point where he would kind of wiggle his arm around and like, I got to roll over, Mom, I'm going to move. But he was always, we called him Gentle Ben. And sweet Gentle Ben, when it came to be born, I was on my hands and knees in a bathtub. And my midwife had delivered my 3 girls, and I did all the right things, pushed and did all the things that I'd known to do with the girls, but it wasn't enough with Ben. And his head started to crown. But then he got something called turtleneck. And turtleneck is where the head starts to recede back into the birth canal. And the turtleneck is the squeezing of the head against the body as it's doing that. And she said, "We have 3 minutes to get this baby out." And I said, I got you the head. What else can I do? I don't know what else to do. And she goes, "You have to push like you've never pushed before." And my first child was 9 pounds. So I understood the definition of push, but for whatever reason, this was different. And so I did. I pushed, and we have a video, and my back just does this thing. It's never done. A muscle in my body did something that I never knew I could do. Like you just don't think about, you think of your arms and your legs, but your torso has this amazing energy to move things in your body. And so I squeezed, and he came out, and in the course of doing so, it broke my tailbone and his collarbone. So we laugh that, that's the mother wound. Like in that moment of him, exiting my body, becoming separate from me, there's an actual physical wound for both of us, a breaking of a bone. So we feel like we've got kind of a special thing going on. All that to say, you can both be pro-choice and pro-life. Like I'm pro-life. I've given life to the point of breaking bones in my body. Like I understand what it means to move, that part of me that I never even knew existed in me got me through it. And I'm suggesting to you that we have a similar muscle around our human form that is going to help us navigate through this. And I see people stepping up all the time right now, moving heaven and earth to make statement about how we're not going to go along with this. There are so many, young men who've been raised by strong women to love women now. There's you guys, Niraj and my son, and I just to see the divine masculine understand its role in honoring the feminine right now is just like, it's so healing. And I say my husband is on the leadership of Men's Breakthrough in Monterey, and we celebrate every man that steps into that process of healing themselves in a community of men, that gives men a space to really let go of all the programming that we assign to them as a patriarchy, but it's the toxic masculine that has been the harm of the masculine just as much as it's been the harm of the feminine. And we somebody asked me once about how I felt about Men's Breakthrough, and I said it makes me breathe easier as a woman. It just gives me the chance to breathe. That's all we want, is the chance to breathe as women, to feel safe in our own bodies, that we are not owned by somebody, that we are not used just for that, that we've been weaponized now to such a degree. I just want men to know that. We love you. We forgive you. We know you come from unconsciousness too. It's not your fault. But it is our shared fault line that men need to step up and hold each other accountable to how they hold the feminine. You're killing us. Institutionally, systematically. And you know I don't mean you, I mean the story of men. And the story of women, and what we've been telling ourselves is not the truth. It's a lie, because it goes against our own bodies of knowing that, we really like each other. We've got parts that fit together beautifully, ecstatically. As humans, isn't it interesting that the unified field translated into the physical realm includes locking parts? Like this is how we get unified. Like the feminine wants to heal with the masculine, we will be able to breathe. And this is what healed looks like when it's institutionalized. In the Netherlands, abortion is freely available. They have the lowest abortion rate in the world. And complication and deaths for abortion are minuscule. How do they do it? First of all, contraception is widely available and free. It's covered by the National Health Insurance Plan, and so on. And their teenage pregnancy rate is 6 times lower than the US. So again, I ask you, if the goal is to reduce the number of abortions, why are we not doing this? And the reason we're not doing it is this next one. I'm so done with this country. Rape isn't rape anymore. I can't withdraw consent during sex. If I'm raped and get pregnant and keep the baby, my rapist can sue me for parental rights. If I get an abortion, I go to jail for the murder. If I miscarry and have even nicotine in my system, I caused an abortion and go to jail for murder. If I travel to a state where abortion is legal and get caught, I go to jail for murder. If I go to jail for aborting, I'm a felon and I can no longer vote, but my insurance can deny me birth control coverage. My pharmacist can refuse to fill my prescriptions. My doctor can lie and refuse to treat me to uphold his or her religious beliefs. I have less rights than an embryo. And if that embryo is female, it has more rights as an embryo than it does when it's born human female. I just want to set this whole fucking country on fire. Abortion is the proxy war between the rise and healing of the feminine and the fall of the patriarchy. And here's the fucking magic of it all, the healing of the masculine. Like, if ever there was a class of humans who were resisting what was good for them, it is the masculine. Like, the way that the masculine clings to this power, this certainty, and I don't fault them. I think it goes back to survival from cave times. Like, there was just this ever-present fear that caused men to do things to each other that this is what I'm saying. We're reaching this tipping point between love and fear. Like the boomerang is reaching its apex of expression, and it's going to make that understanding so transparent to us that it does not take a rocket scientist. It does not take a seer. It just takes an open mind to see what's happening, that life is happening for us, not to us. And so here's the deal. You got to get in the middle of that boomerang. You got to be like a ballerina dancer who gets a spot. And what is your spot? What do you come back to again and again as this thing gets more and more chaotic around us? Because believe me, it's going to. Because we're giving birth to something really big here. And it's generational. It's going to take 5 generations to move through this. We're just the first responders, right? So how do we build a bridge to a group of humans that are so certain that their value on this planet is forcing other people to live in their fear-based world? I just read a piece yesterday about the recruiting aspect of Christianity. Like from the very start, your salvation has been tied to recruiting others. And the only way you can recruit others is if your way of life is demonstrably better than what they're living. And so they have this Pollyannish view of everybody could live Sunday school lives, but that doesn't allow for free expression, and it doesn't allow for diversity of experience that we can't. So they're in a mortal battle to prove their way is the way. So they will do anything to justify this story because they have tied their own salvation to this fear-based construct of do this or else. And as I've said before, hell is not a thing. It's an idea that keeps people afraid. So my 35 years in the church, I wrote this 2 years ago because I could feel this movement to sort of grab the feminine by the throat and throttle her back into submission, sort of Handmaid's Tale stuff. If you watched it, you know what I'm referring to. So I thought, but this is crazy. They're not even following their own doctrine, because I know I lived this doctrine and this is where I had to step away. And so I wrote this because I wanted it to be a guide to help people have a conversation with their anti-choice. I don't even call them pro-life. They're anti-choice. Have a conversation with them that comes to meet them where they are in their own source of truth. So this is doctrine stuff here, guys. Do you believe in God? Duh, of course they do. The point of the question is to next establish their beliefs about the nature of God. So here's what we ask next. Do you believe God is both all-knowing and all-powerful? And the answer is yes, yes, right? Yeah, omniscient, omnipresent, God knows everything, God is all-powerful. So, okay, we're establishing that belief system is solid. Okay, question number 2. Do you believe we are eternal beings, that our souls are eternal? And if they hesitate by responding, ask it this way. Is God an eternal being? Are we made in his image? Are we therefore also eternal beings? The answer is going to be yes, yes, and yes. So now I've established that they believe that the soul exists outside of the physical body, right? Can you feel we just went through that conversation? I have not disrupted any of their belief structure here. I've just asked them to track it with me, right? Follow-up question number 2. Based on those responses, is it fair to say that the eternal soul exists before we are born in human form and thereafter? So now we have a origin story and a resolution story, that something exists beyond the physical realm, right? We're coming to agreement that there is a separation between soul and body, right? That the soul is eternal. Now, if you can't get a yes from this question, it's because they can already feel where you're leading them. The inner conflict is already showing. Push for resolution on this point. Are we eternal or not? Do we exist outside the human form or not? And does being eternal mean we never really die? If the answer is no, then what is heaven? If there is no heaven, then the choices I make now don't matter. Is that what you're saying? Oh, no, you can't have an abortion. No, we're telling you what you can't, but if there's no heaven, if we're not eternal. So the dominoes begin to stack up, right? If you can't get them to agree on their own teachings, don't bother going through the rest of the questions. They've made it clear they're unwilling to be intellectually or spiritually honest with you or themselves. If you get a yes, you move on. Question 3, do you believe the cornerstone of God's plan is based on free will? Now, there are different versions of how we adopted the free will conscious model of thought. Biblical scholars will talk about that Jesus and Satan were brothers. And the way that the story unfolds, they go to their Heavenly Father and he says, I want you to design a plan for humans to return home to learn the lessons of love. Come home. And Jesus goes off and Satan goes off and they come together with their thoughts, and then they go back and they present their plan. And Satan's plan was that the only way to bring people back to heaven was to basically force them to comply, to set up all kinds of rules and commandments, to, rather than give people free will, to force them to do the right thing. That was the only way. And Jesus's plan was to give humans free will, that they could exercise choice and therefore return to their Father, motivated and animated through the expansion of love, not fear, as was Satan's plan. So this is pretty solid doctrine here, guys. Like, we chose free will. That was the plan. So if you are a very embedded Christian in this belief system, this is fundamental to your construct of theory of everything, this concept of free will. So that takes us to the really, big question here is, when does life begin? Or more importantly, when does the eternal soul enter the human form? Wait, what? Did she just ask me to link the start of life to the eternal soul? You feel the paradigm shift here? We're not attaching eternity to the physical form. Yes, I did. In this moment, the internal conflict heats up to a fever pitch. I reference a few passages about life beginning and ending with breath. These are not my passages. These are out of the books that you say bring the truth of your story to life. So the Hebrew word ruach encompasses the belief that the breath of God is the breath of life. He that breathes life into all things, life begins with breath, and then it goes on. He breathed into his nostrils and breath of life, and it was then that man became a living being. Although the man was fully formed by God in all respects, he is not a living being until after taking his first breath. In Job, it states, the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. Again, to quote Ezekiel, thus says the Lord God to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live, and I will lay sinews upon you, and will cause flesh to come upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you. Put breath in you after all those other parts are done. And you shall know that I am Lord. I believe that there are good Christians who believe this. And I believe that their faith, their big toe that really does source from love, has been hijacked by a fear-based power structure that has used the concept of redemption and forgiveness and eternal life as a tool of coercion to their ideological supremacy, white supremacy. Like it's a devious plot, my loves. So the 4 questions outlined above will do one of 2 things. They will either walk away from the discussion because of their curse of certainty, or they will allow that it's possible that someone who loves God can parse God's words lovingly but differently than they do. That it's possible to be pro-life and pro-choice when you frame the conversation around abortion being the lesser of evils rather than good versus evil. So how do we love each other enough to meet in the middle and agree to disagree on our big toes? You get to have your beliefs, we get to have ours. We can be both pro-life and pro-choice. This is not a choice of good versus evil. This is the human story seeking the lesser of evils, something leading to a very heart-wrenching choice. But we mustn't damage motherhood by forcing unwilling participants into its ranks. Each woman must have the confidence of her own knowing she's ready to embark on the path to motherhood. Souls landing in those welcoming wombs fare far better in the world than those fear-marinated in the womb of a reluctant mother. Our failure of imagination makes abortion a binary choice. It falls on the spectrum of distress that, if met with love, could be a rare choice indeed. I'm not out to make anybody wrong, but I want people to be accountable to what they believe. And so if we're going to have a healing conversation, we have to own that we don't know, truly know what happens before we get here or what happens after. We may have all the believe it as so's that we possibly want to organize around aliens and astrology and astronomy and all the different ways that we fill out our big toe that makes it interesting to us. You know, like, why are we here and why do we tick the way we do? All of that's very fascinating stuff, but it falls in the category of big toe. It's your theory. Religion is a theory. And I want to take back the right to claim my theory as valid as the Christian theory of everything. And my theory is the soul is eternal. And if a mother and a child, a soul to soul, have a conversation and it's not meant to happen yet, that's part of the story. I want to hold that true because that brings more love into the moment for everybody. So we have to begin to really grab a hold of this transition from fear to love and stand on the side of love every time. And you do that by holding this frame that life is happening for me, not to me. Life is happening for us, not to us. This chaos, this gyrational torque, this angular momentum. I mean, we are sliding. You got to point yourself every day towards yourself. And just remember that this is part of the movement of birthing ourselves into something higher and more true than what we've ever experienced. Maybe individually, we have those moments of real grace where we see ourselves, but what we're really moving toward is collective grace. And to achieve that in the physical world is what we came to do, like to totally manifest love in a physical realm. Doesn't that make sense that that's why we had to move through the shadow to come into the light? We had to experience love not only through the abundance of it, but also the scarcity lens. To know the scarcity of love is to be in touch with our original wound and to reboot it for ourselves. On another night, I'll tell you a recent experience for me of meeting myself at the moment of my trauma. And in that place, I had a structural shift happen in my lens of perception about life. I was fearful of it. I had basic panic in my body most of my life. But when you get to that place where you realize that none of this is personal, it's all just part of the evolution of the soul to return to its source code of love. It starts to feel like a dance. And so I had a dance with a beautiful human this weekend who came to share his soul with me, and I took him through the healing conversation, and he had just this beautiful revelation when I said life happens for you, not to you. And he unpacked it, and he brought something to me that I want to bring to you. He said, if life is happening to you, you're a victim. If life is just happening, you have no engagement, you're neutral, right? It's just happening. If life is happening for you, he said, you're empowered. And I hadn't quite put the words to it that way, but if you believe that life is happening for you, and you get to that realization when you look at your entire human timeline and you say, I wouldn't change a thing. I appreciate every trajectory shifting moment of my personal story that brought me to this calculus of me lining up with the calculus of now. You know, that's where that spirit and body begin to resonate in the same place. The body becomes our trust point. And so I'm moving into this, what I call this age of consent. And the way that we get to that consent is through this portal of trust. And so while I was with this beautiful human on Saturday, this came through in such clarity that it like 3 times hit me upside of the head and made me get up and write it down, because sometimes I miss really pretty stuff because I'm in it, not just transmitting it. But this one was a keeper. It said, fall in love with trust. And I sat with that. It's like, what does that mean? What are the implications of falling in love with trust? Trusting that life really is happening for me, not to me. How far down that rabbit hole of trust are we talking? You know, is it just showing up for a conversation once a week and having deep thoughts, or am I moving into a real sense of integration with my own story? Like, how big is your trust, right? And so falling in love with trust. Now, trust is a synonym for love. Falling in love with love. Oh, play with that for a while. And then falling in love with life also fit in that spot too, like life and love and trust that life is love. Like, oh, wow, fall in love with life. Oh, that sounds way more interesting and easing in my body than just the word trust. Because with the word trust, there's a hesitancy, there's a resistance, there's a little bit of a suspension of fear that I have to get through to move into that place of trust. You know what I'm talking about, right? The word trust is a big, like, every time I go sit with Mama Aya, it's like, oh, I gotta trust this because it's not easy. This is hard work. Like, oh, people who are just coming into medicine work, we got to have a long conversation about what this is. Like, I feel so strongly that the conversation that we should be having right now is about this whole movement of initiation that we're in, and these medicines are coming online, and we need to have integration support. And so falling in love with trust, it changed my brain this week. It was another one of those gyrational torque moments, like, oh, trust is something I can really enjoy. But I also have to really feel it in my body. So I've had this book on my shelf for probably 3 years. And this happens. Books show up and they're not time. And they go back on the shelf. But this one like screamed out at me yesterday. And so I picked it up, and Stephen and I have this morning practice. We read together every morning. And we give each other the A's of love. And that's I'll do a whole night just on relationship stuff, because we've got some pretty sweet practices. But this book jumped off, and it's all about how to really listen to, it's David Hawkins' Power versus Force, how to really feel for trust in your body. Like, the kinesiology, spiritual kinesiology, if you will, metaphysical kinesiology, learning to align spirit and matter in a visceral alignment of ease in the human story. Like this, falling in love with trust is falling in love with your body. It's falling in love with every bit that got you. I had this moment of, I want to fall in love with trust, because falling in love with trust is falling in love with myself. It's falling in love with life. It's the consent to the human experience. This is the definition of it. So next week, I am going to take you guys on the roadmap of consciousness. This has been building, kind of like I started off ready to solve for X equals love. And I want to talk about some of the landmarks along the way that we've all experienced. And so I'm hoping to begin to create a common language, a new lexicon of terminology that you can say to somebody, ooh, dark night of the soul stuff. Oh yeah, big ego death, total, psychic interrupt, or oh, I'm in that valley of despair. Man, I am right in the middle of one of those mountains of meaning and I have not found it yet, but I trust I'm in the middle of something. Like to have that kind of lexicon of common language to offset the language of fear. The whole bottom line of the healing conversation is what I refer to as shameless healing. Like taking the mystery out of the healing process, still allowing for each individual's, breadcrumbs along the way and pivot points. And I want to walk you through this map because I'm absolutely certain, because I've done this with a few people now, you'll recognize some of the same landmarks, the same road signs of your own journey. And what that starts to say to me is there's a path home. And as a bridge builder, I think we can walk each other home if we begin to build this language. So the abortion conversation is a gift. It's an absolute gift. And it's something that is going to kick our ass for a while. There's just no doubt about it. It's going to be a challenge for us to move through this proxy war where the feminine is the weaponized tool of fear. But what they don't realize is mama knows how to birth shit. And she is steady and she is strong and she will get through this. She's waited a long time to claim her right to breathe in this human story. May it be so, may it be love. I'll stop there with the channel, have a drink, and invite you to come back in and lay an impression down. What comes up for you in this conversation? Anybody? Don't be shy. Niraj, jump in, brother.
All right, thank you. I really loved, first of all, I gotta say the whole thing was so powerful for me because I loved how you go into the abortion conversation. And I don't have these conversations very often, right? I mean, I've been reading it since, I was a kid, but, but really the most powerful thing that you said was about trusting life, that whole bit for those 3, 4, 5 minutes. That was just beautiful. I'm gonna actually, when you put the video back on the next couple of days, I'm gonna go back to that 5-minute piece because that is where I'm at right now. Is that surrender of life, the play with life, life working with us, for our growth. And I love the fact that I'm here in community, kind of leading in on some of these principles and just people. I've met some of you in person, some, So just, I really appreciate this. I don't know, it's beautiful.
I love having you here.
Thank you.
We got to figure out how to not have that be so bad. Thank you, Niraj. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There is nothing on earth I would rather be doing right now than having these conversations with people, unpacking the fear one aspect at a time. Like I want to do a whole series just on family healing. Like this does not have to be a painful process if we all open up to do it together. Right? Mike, you want to jump in? Mike Dinkle? Wait, Mike Beck is here first and then Mike Dinkle. I love having two mics. This is like
I'll be Michael. I'll be Michael if you want to be Mike, Mr.
Okay.
Dinkle. Michael Beck and Mike Dinkle. Okay. Well, you know, I guess I've been thinking about the abortion issue in pretty conventional political terms recently, you know, with, you know, hoping the Republicans have finally done a little overreach and this wedge issue suddenly is going to come back to bite them in the ass, which I still hope. But it was useful to expand the frame of, that's right. There's a Gaian perspective on this that's useful and calming in a certain sort of way. Like, oh yeah, we'll have our short-term political machinations, but Mama will prevail in the end, of course.
Our birth rates are already going down, and it isn't just, we just are less fertile. And I think this is what happens when a species, an invasive species overruns. It starts to, it can only grow so fast. We're a tumor that eventually kills itself. So yeah, it's a heavy way to think about it, but this is short term. And so what it is for me is a moment for the feminine to come together. Like even women who might in public have one face, in private, in the voting booth, if they feel like they're not betraying something, but they have a deeper insight, like to really bring the feminine into this conversation, like women, feminine, we're here to heal this patriarchal story. And they know the story because they've lived it. I know it because I lived it. That was my 35 years in the church, and I just could not live there anymore because it was not in my own enlightened self-interest to continue to live in that world. And I think there are a lot of women who live a very closeted life, who I believe that we could reach, not by making them wrong, but by pointing out the way that their faith has been perverted for political gain. Nobody likes to be used. Yeah. Linda, anything you want to jump in with?
Yeah and no. This whole thing has got me rattled to the bone. So I'm just really struggling with it. I'm remembering when I was, a high schooler and went through that, and getting called to go and stand at Planned Parenthood to protect the people who are coming in because Operation Rescue is out there.
Right.
With their signs, and I'm completely overwhelmed. So I'm a little bit checking out. I have to admit, it's just like, what the fuck? We're doing this again. I can't even, and then that what is it Niraj?
Niraj, yeah.
Niraj. That was the one thing in particular that came up, was the slide that was like, fall in love with trust. And I'm like, oh, I don't think so. No, I can't trust this bullshit. So I know that's what I have to work on. I mean, there it is. And when you put that up a while ago, I saw that and I was like, I kind of took a deep breath and oh yeah, right. Trust. There's a whole lot of trust and there's a whole lot of work. And so at the moment, I'm just really overwhelmed, but I would just wanted to be here and hear other people.
You're right. When you were standing as guardian to choice, that was the sort of, as we said, the 60s and 70s were kind of the Braxton Hicks of what is happening now. Like we could see that the movement against the feminine, the Equal Rights Amendment, like we thought we were growing up together. men and women, and we were going to get through this together, and we're going to grow into this world of equality, and yet all these things, these constructs kept pulling us back. No childcare, no health care, like all these ways that the feminine has been kept in a dependent relationship. And now, like, it's I think women are going to go to the voting booth and say enough. You know, this war on women, but I think we have to create a shameless healing environment where we're not here to make anybody wrong. Everybody has done what they needed to do to survive to get to this moment. And that's why there can be no blame and no shame and no. We just got caught up in our big toes and we forgot how to dance with each other. And this is not just a big toe, this is a big cock up inside our bodies. I mean, think about it. There's an energetic signature to this moment where the feminine is, I came up with a hashtag, it was no sex text. Like, I'm sorry, guys, until you figure this shit out, we're out of here. Like, there is a point at which the feminine is just going to say enough. And I think we're reaching that moment. And that's when she starts to find her voice. And she votes in a legislature that says, no. We have a right to this physical expression. Period. No qualifiers, no value proposition, no transactional conversation to be had here. We is what we is, right? So yeah, thank you, Linda. I feel your overwhelm. I feel the fatigue. It's just an ongoing exhaustion being a woman in a patriarchal doctrine of dominion society. We are the expendable beast. We do all the heavy lifting of the emotions, of the child rearing, of the hearth. My friend's really got her heart wrapped around the hearth of the home. The feminine is the hearth of the home. And I'm not talking, like barefoot and pregnant. I'm talking about the feminine in the home is the core of well-being. And whether that's expressed through a man or expressed through a woman or somewhere on the spectrum, wherever we are, the feminine is the nurturer. It's the creator energy. So this, the men are coming along with this too. Why do I love Men's Breakthrough? Because it helps me breathe better. Anybody else want to jump in? Karen, you got something?
Well, yes, I was sort of in alignment with what you were saying, in that I look at this law as a law of rape. It is taking advantage of women and their sovereignty and what they have to offer, and to belittle them and have total disregard for the birthing, the giving, the nurturing process that women offer. And for me, being an environmentalist and in regenerative farmer, I look at us doing the same thing to Mother Earth. And we're just the people representative, the gender representative of what's being done to Mother Earth. And so it's an easier thing to control women of this patriarchal society than it is to deal with climate change and all the destructive things we're doing to the mother. So here we are again, the mother.
Yeah. Amen, Mama. Amen. It's if it wasn't so obvious, it would be painful. Like it's just so clear what we're going through, and to hold it through the lens of love is big work, because we're talking thousands of years of wounding and oppression passed on. This is so deep in our bones. I loved what you said, Linda. You feel this down to your bones. Yes, it's in our fucking marrow. that we have carried this burden of holding the light by ourselves for so long on this. Like, we need men, and that's why I love Mike Dinkle and Niraj and Mike and all the men in my life that show up ready to own their shit. You know, when this whole Me Too movement came out, it was like, I want to have a big coming out party where every man wears a sign, I own my misogyny. I'm sorry, I will do better now. Like, almost a clean slate day. Like, I don't want to make you wrong. I just want you to own it. I just want you to get your ego out in front on this one and just own how you've done stuff to us without meaning to. I mean, this idea that we're going to leapfrog into consciousness, it has to come with some reconciliation work. There's some ritual of forgiveness and grieving. You've heard me maybe use this term, for grieving. Like, we all are going to feel that grief when we come to the realization of what we've done to ourselves. You know, that's just part of the story that we need to move through. So, Deanne, do you want to jump in? Are you there? Sometimes she listens from afar.
I'm here, love. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. Oh, well, we touched on a lot, and I'm just, I feel like I'm roaring with you. Like, there's a feminine roar that wants to rise. You know, and it's, you know, I see also how women in their power, and one form of power is in their sexuality, right? And it's okay in the form of prostitution and pornography because it's controlled by men. But when women are empowered in their sexuality, then it gets silenced and oppressed and censored again. You know, I think that's a very big healing that needs to happen. And I almost feel like we're past the point of just showing up to vote. I would really love to see women rise into positions of in the political system, right? Because it's systemic change that needs to happen. Women in corporations, women with money, because money in our society right now, you know, creates power. So, you know, those are ways that we can really support women, because I think it has to happen at a much higher and deeper level and really broad, you know, to really create systemic change.
You know, you and I were talking today, it's good to see you again, about how we've witnessed many men in our lives come forward and say, I understand what my role is here. My role is to support the feminine in her fullest expression. And we feel safe with men that hold that truth with us, because we feel it too. We know that we know how to do this. And but we also need to do it with you. I had this one night, a beautiful download about that we were crossing a bridge. Of course, as a bridge builder, this is my call to action. And what was clear was, although some of us are the bridge builders, and I believe everyone in this room is a bridge builder, nobody gets to cross the bridge until we all cross the bridge. And just think about the metaphor of that representation, that, you know, this only works if we all go together. Now, the good news is there's going to be a cascade of consciousness, and it starts with this 3.5% of the population. And that's why the app, and I'm trying to, you know, gather the right people around me to help bring this to the next level of cooperative creation, collaboration. But in the meantime, you can see where, as you said, Deanne, if we could begin to really understand the dynamics of what's happening right now and how we can manifest, activate ourselves in a way that serves the greater good, that we're not about punishment, it's not about making people wrong, it's about cleaning up the mess on aisle 3, to really get clear that we all go together. There are no winners and losers. It's all of us coming together to do this. And for right now, we know how to clean up the mess on aisle 3. So give us some space. help us, empower us, put the resources into those organizations and those women, and I'm not even just sure it's all women, but it's a mindset of healing versus consumption versus, like, we could engulf our economy with the legalization of human potential, because right now it's not well served at all. It's made illegal by the way that we perceive the path to that expansion. Like, we see it as woo-woo, and we see it as drugs, and we see it as a distraction from the desirable behavior of workaholics, right? Like, what do you mean you guys don't want to come back to work after the pandemic? Of course you do. You know, like, we're done. You can see we're moving past the old story already. And
Did anybody see the piece when during the first shutdown, they looked at all the COVID cases across the world, and the countries with the lowest cases that had it under control were mostly women-led countries.
Oh yeah. Jacinda Ardern. Woo! That's where you see, that's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She is what I see as the embodiment of the feminine in leadership. Like, we're going to see a lot more of that mama energy, like knows that the right thing is the only thing left to us, is not trying to navigate around old story anymore. She just knows. And yeah, thank you for that, Deanne. I want to, the other Deanna Hobbs, will you pop in for a minute and just give us an impression before we all go to bed for the night? Okay, she might have stepped away. No worries. We are happy to have you. So that was number 2, and I'll give me a day and I'll get it processed and I'll get it up, and then Niraj, you can go grab that clip. And here's what I would love for you to consider. I'm asking you to put a little spiritual capital on the line and start talking about this conversation that we're having. And maybe think about inviting 1 or 2 friends in to the conversation, because you can feel it building. It's going to progress, and there's going to be a lot of material that I'm going to move through. I'm pulling up all the recordings for the last 7 years and bringing them into the moment. And so I want you to, when I get those recordings up there, maybe go in and say, it was good, or it was this, but really listen to this piece. You know, grab the piece that you want other people to hear. And then maybe they won't commit to 2 hours, but they might commit to 5 minutes. Like, you grab the snippet that means something to you, and then tell them why it means something to you. Start to weave your story into the healing conversation, because it's all of us telling ourselves a story with a happy ending that makes the shift here. Because we have a failure of imagination. We have bought a story where nobody gets out alive. And we are a choice point, a collective choice point away from doing this in a way that I love being part of a church dinner on a Sunday night, working in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, everybody's doing dishes and food is flying and stuff is happening. And I mean, I love being in community. I want to be part of the healing conversation across this planet. And I think people will wake up every day wanting to go to work, wanting to contribute to the well-being of mankind, to feel like you're part of that engine moving us forward, not the pullback trying to keep us back in the old way. Like, you talk about companies, Deanne, that are going to thrive. It's those that understand what we're going through, those that understand their role in facilitating the movement to the new story. Like, there's just you nailed it. Our economy is the decision-making construct building reality of our story. And if we can begin to shift the way we think of value in this human construct, that it's not tied to money, it's tied to contribution to the well-being, it's tied to healing for the well-being. Like it's truly just a perceptual shift away to start moving the resources and therefore the construct of our human story in a whole new direction. Does that make sense? So let's get some more people involved in this conversation. Let's start to really build out a framework that people can take into any, talk about abortion, great. Let's bring on the fossil fuels. Let's bring on all the taboo topics that we've been afraid to approach because we had such polarized views. I don't think we're that polarized. I think what we want is to be able to feel safe in the human story. So not who did you vote for, but what are you willing to put your spiritual capital on? Because that's more important than the politics of an old construct. This is the policies and manifested realities of a whole new construct that we're building right now. We're architects of love. So I'll leave you with that and say thank you for being here. Maybe I'll see you next week. Maybe I'll see you on the recording. But it means the world to me that you're here on this path with me. Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks, Edie. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night, and thank you.
Ciao.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Niraj. My body's starting to drop in already. I've been like really feeling the beautiful, blissful hangover since last Wednesday night. Like I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am that you guys are showing up. I used to say to people, it's a 3-day workshop, and if you show up all 3 days, I'm going to think you like me.
We love you.
We love,
Yes.
yes, of course. We love each other. And that's the whole point of this conversation. So last week I talked about that movement from passive to activated consciousness. And I'm just wondering, where did anything pop into your head this week from our last conversation? Can we follow up on last week? What stood out for you? Because Niraj, you were gone at the end, so I didn't get to hear from you. And that
Sorry about that.
no harm, no foul. That's why I'm recording it, and I so trust when people come and go. But was there anything in particular that grabbed you? Because you were one of my first healing conversations 3 years ago.
That was it. Yes, that was a lot of fun. I asked a lot of questions in that one, actually. That was very nice of you to answer them 3 years ago. That was a really cool. Should I go like what I feel?
Yeah, give me a couple minutes. Yeah.
You know, I think it gave me really a container to explore some of the themes that you brought up. I know that's kind of, I'm one of those people where my mind's racing at 50 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. And oftentimes I'm in the matrix, but I feel like when I'm here, right, in this container, it allows me to kind of explore more of my heart chakra, more of this, the spiritual aspect of it, Not saying I'm not doing that, moment to moment, hour to hour, by doing some breath work here and there, just going for some walks, but, it's just, I appreciate that no question is stupid. And